All right, welcome to the Cardinal Zone podcast. We're taping this on a gloomy Thursday afternoon in Madison. I'm Jake Powers, and I'm here with Zach Rastall and Andrew Tucker. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing well.
Doing just fine.
Beautiful. So we'll just hop right in, I guess, with the news of the day.
Yeah, the big news of the day, Austin Traylor out for 4 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, the best case scenario for that is he's back for Maryland and then the final 2 games. Worst case scenario, 7 games or 8 games, he's out for the rest of the regular season, which is a big loss for a guy that's tied for, I believe, 4th on the team with 10 catches.
Correct, yeah, and he's like, the big story with Traylor coming in was all summer he worked on improving himself. Last year he obviously had issues catching the ball. And the big story was that he was catching 100 balls a day during the summer. He's been working hard to get back in there, and he knew he would see extended playing time, and that sort of had shown through in the first couple of games. He sort of established himself as a really, if not flashy, a really dependable pass catcher and someone who Stave could rely on.
Yeah, so what are the implications of this, do you think, going forward? I mean, we saw last weekend how bad the pass game can struggle when they lose a couple receivers. There's not many options to begin with. The running game hasn't been going this year, so how big of a blow is this to the team?
It's definitely a significant blow. I mean, he's top 5 in the team in pass catches, one of the few guys that has double-digit catches. He's tied for the team lead in touchdown receptions. So he certainly is a favorite target of Joel Stave. Obviously, it's not as bad as if they had Erickson still out, who he missed a couple days of practice, but he's back in because he leads the team, double the second best guy in receptions. But it still is definitely going to set back an offense that, at best, is mediocre.
And a good point I think you touched on today, Andrew, in your piece about Traylor was how Nebraska's pass defense is kind of lagging behind its run defense, and I think that obviously it's never good to have a pass catcher like Traylor out, but against Nebraska that could be a situation where they can actually get away with it. And,
yeah, Nebraska's last in the nation in pass defense. That means that they're worse than Eastern Michigan, worse than Akron, worse than teams in the Sun Belt. So they obviously could use some improvement. So I think that Joel Stave should be fine this week. But in a couple weeks when they're, at, Rutgers or playing against Rutgers and, those sorts of games will certainly, it'll be a heavy factor in those games.
Sure. Speaking of the Nebraska game, do you think we can expect Joel Stave to have a bounce back week?
That he can. I think he will because he just played so poorly on Saturday. 4 turnovers. The 2 interceptions were completely correctable. The fumble on the goal line at the end of the game that potentially lost them the game, he tripped and instead of tucking the ball away, kept it out. It's just the sort of things that he can easily correct, and I think that I don't see him having more than 2 turnovers this week against a poor pass offense. But if the run gets stopped as it easily could, and he has to throw 30, 40 passes, it'll be tough for him.
And that's the biggest thing with the offense this year is last year we were almost used to having Melvin Gordon rip off, those 20-yard rushes, and that really has a way of sparking the offense, to say it very lightly. But they just don't have that luxury this year. There aren't the playmakers that can sort of energize a struggling offense at this point, when they go first down and second down and they're only picking up 2 or 3 yards per play, which is what they're averaging. In those cases, it's rough when you don't have a guy who can, make the big plays and sort of spark their drives and keep the chains moving. And that's where they're sort of being stalled, and that's why they've struggled.
So in the aftermath of the Iowa loss, a lot of fan discontent was directed towards Stave, but there's plenty of blame to go around on offense with the run game. They struggled all year. The offensive line has not been that good. What do they need to do better this week to beat Nebraska?
They just need to block better. The offensive line has been... They're young is what the issue is. Wisconsin's used to having four seniors on the offensive line that have all started for 2 or 3 years, and then 1 new guy. This year they return 2 returning players and have 3 new guys switching in. And not just that, they haven't been able to solidify those 3. They've been trying different permutations, switching guys in and out. So if the offensive line can start to finally get in sync, the run game and pass game will likely follow.
And it's interesting just looking at the inconsistency of the offensive line in stark contrast with what's happening on the other side of the ball. I mean, we saw last week, obviously Joe Schobert played the game of his life, truly, against Iowa, and they're just really establishing themselves as one of the strongest units in the nation, and I think that's partially a result of Aranda sort of, he's been able to, get more comfortable with the system. Each year he's been here at Wisconsin, and the players are getting comfortable with him. They really have a good thing going there, and I expect that to continue against Nebraska. I don't see any reason why that'll break anytime soon, especially a team like the Cornhuskers.
Yeah, earlier in the week I tweeted out that Joe Schobert has as many or more sacks as over half the nation. So there are half of the teams don't have 9 sacks that Joe Schobert does. So that just shows how well he has played. He's been absolutely fantastic. He kept Wisconsin in the game against Iowa almost single-handedly. Because without him on defense, Iowa could have been wreaking havoc.
This is a Nebraska team that fired Bo Pelini in the offseason after every single year he was there with 4 losses. Fans got sick of the 4 losses every year. In big games, they just seem to flop. Bring in Mike Riley from Oregon State. He gets off to a 2-3 start. Fans aren't happy. Do you think we're going to see a Cornhuskers team that's kind of in panic mode yet?
I don't think that they will admit to being in panic mode, as most coaches and players are pretty trained to not say things like that. But I think that deep down, they've got to be kind of feeling the heat. They know that their fans aren't content with 4-loss seasons. Even if they're going to good bowl games and winning good bowl games, 4 losses is too many for Nebraska fans. And if they get their 4th loss by Game 6, I'm sure that Mike Riley's seat is going to feel a lot hotter.
That's a good point, and the teams won't like to admit it, but both Wisconsin and Nebraska are 2 teams that are very much, they have their backs up against the wall. Wisconsin falling to Iowa, and then just the absolute mystery as to what happened in Champaign to Nebraska is just, they say every year that the Big Ten West is wide open, and that's again the case this year. And it's interesting to see 2 of the contenders from last season fall so early on. So they definitely feel that. I think that's definitely on the forefront of their minds, even if that's not something that they want to be talking about.
Yeah, that's a lot of the teams coming in the year. You had Wisconsin, Minnesota. There's a lot of people thinking that once again the Big Ten West might be decided in their game. Both haven't looked that good so far. You have Iowa's off to a great start. Northwestern's off to a phenomenal start. And I mean, Iowa's path is especially easy. So Wisconsin's already 0-1 in Big Ten play. Do you think they're out of the Big Ten West race if they lose Saturday?
If they lose Saturday, yeah, I'd say it's an uphill battle because they've already played Iowa, who's ahead of them. Playing against Northwestern, Wisconsin has a very, very weak history against Northwestern. They lose to Northwestern quite often, even if Northwestern isn't good. So you would assume that they would lose again to a good Northwestern team. But if they win, I think they're still very much in the race. 1 loss, most of the teams will probably end up with at least 1 loss, if not more, just because it is a very even competition this year. No team really stands out, except for maybe Northwestern, stands out as being significantly head and shoulders better than the rest.
Definitely. I mean, Northwestern leads with this defense, first and foremost. They're one of the strongest units in the nation, and that's something that Pat Fitzgerald has worked to sort of complete during his tenure, and that's finally starting to show through, is sort of is lean toward the defensive side of the ball, and recruiting and everything is really coming together this year. Their offense is inconsistent. They obviously have a redshirt freshman quarterback in who's still kind of learning the ropes of everything. The running back's a sophomore. It's a very young, inexperienced offense who often has trouble moving the ball.
Staying on topic with Northwestern, the Big Ten game of the weekend is Michigan against Northwestern. Probably the 2 most impressive Big Ten teams so far. I mean, Northwestern's been off to a great start after coming off back-to-back 5-7 seasons. The Wolverines, Jim Harbaugh's first year, you could argue that they might be the most impressive team in the Big Ten East so far, because Michigan State, Ohio State, both undefeated, but neither have looked good. So, I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think that this is potentially, as odd as it may sound, this could be the matchup in Indy for the Big Ten championship game. With, Ohio State and Michigan State both have looked underwhelming, despite both being ranked in the top 5. And Michigan and Northwestern have both looked fantastic so far. But I like Michigan to win this game just because I think that with Harbaugh and just the way he has these guys motivated, I just feel like they have so much momentum behind them. It will be a very even match game, and I would not be surprised if it's less than a field goal game.
I think you're getting a little ahead of yourself there, calling it a potential Big Ten championship matchup, but it's a good game nevertheless. Like you said, I think it's two evenly matched teams. Really, I think it'll be strength against strength, and we'll see how things turn out. I think you covered it there, Andrew.
All right, shifting our focus back to Badger sports. Elsewhere, we have men's hockey kicking off their season this weekend at home against Northern Michigan.
Yeah, these two teams met up early in the season last year, albeit it was played in Green Bay on the campus of UW Green Bay, and Northern Michigan won 2-0 and then 4-1 in those two games. So it'll be interesting to see if bringing it to Madison will make any difference, but Wisconsin will be the underdog in this game. Northern Michigan's returning their top 5 point scorers from last season. They're returning both the goalies that they had last year. They split time, whereas Wisconsin loses their star goalie, Joel Rumpel, loses their top 3 point scorers, and is coming off the worst season in program history. So I think that Northern Michigan certainly has an edge on Friday and Saturday night.
As you mentioned, last season was just dreadful for the Badgers, the worst in program history. A lot of calls for Mike Eaves to get fired. He was not, but obviously squarely on the hot seat this year. How do you think the Badgers have to do this season to save his job?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Eaves. A lot of people were calling for Eaves, and in response, the athletic department fired all of his assistants. So they have a whole new crop of assistant coaches now, but the head coach still remains. And Mike Eaves is squarely on the hot seat. I think that he needs to have a season that is over 500 for him to keep his job. I think that, because if you look at, in the past, 10 years, he's been doing moderately well, but on the other side, for women's hockey, Mark Johnson has been doing fantastic. So I think that the Badgers see that they've got these two coaches that are both very different. One's being incredibly successful, one's being moderately successful. One's trending downward, the other's trending upward. So they see that they've got someone in their athletic department that could easily replace him and potentially do a better job than he's doing. So I think that having Mark Johnson as the women's head coach makes his seat even hotter than it would be.
And speaking of the women's program, they started last weekend, so they have a week up on the men's program, and they were in San Jose and they played Providence. They won the first game 5-1 and the second game 8-1. Just an absolutely dominating weekend and a really promising start to a year that very well could see them going deep in the postseason once again. One thing that Mark Johnson touched on a lot from the weekend was on Sunday, in conjunction with Providence, they actually hosted a youth hockey clinic for young girls in Southern California, and he said there were over 100 young girls there competing and sort of trying out the sport and everything like that. And that's a big part of Mark Johnson's shtick, is sort of increasing the popularity of the sport, trying to spread the word, showing that it's a sport for young girls and boys alike who can get involved even in areas where you don't immediately think ice hockey. You wouldn't think that it'd be popular in Southern California, but that's turned out to be a hotbed of talent in recent years, and Johnson's definitely trying to sort of plant that seed there and get that on the minds of people out there.
I wouldn't say that there's much pressure on Mark Johnson in Wisconsin this year, but I think there is a little bit of concern that, there's used to be Wisconsin, Minnesota were the top 2 programs in the country. Kind of everyone else was quite a bit below them. Wisconsin still obviously one of the top programs. They're in the Frozen Four almost every year, but they consistently lose to Minnesota now. The Gophers have taken most of the national championships in recent years. They keep beating Wisconsin. And so I think there might be a little bit of pressure on the Badgers this year to finally get that monkey off their back, beat Minnesota finally. And, they haven't won a national championship in, I believe it's 4 years, which, that doesn't seem like that much. But, for a program that's been as successful as them, and when your bitter rival has really been doing well in the meantime, I think it adds a little bit of pressure.
Exactly. And Minnesota rolls into Lebanon in early December. They have a weekend series December 4th and December 5th, and that'll really be a chance to see how far the women's program has improved throughout the offseason. And they do have a good chunk of the yes. beginning of the year to really get honed down, sort of lock in their new lineups, and hopefully by that time they'll be playing their best hockey for when the Golden Gophers roll into town.
And they do have a lot of returning starters this year, too, so that bodes well for the Badgers.
Yeah, and it's funny, too. We talked about earlier about Bo Pelini getting fired because of, having high standards. Mark Johnson's won 4 national championships. So people start to kind of say, oh, well, if they're not contending for the national championship, that's a bad year. But, they'll make the tournament, they'll win a game in the tournament, and people say, oh, well, but they didn't go far enough. And so it's tough. It's almost a lose-lose situation for him because unless he wins it all, which only one team in the nation will do, it's almost a disappointment for fans. And obviously, the players would be ecstatic to win the Big Ten, go to the tournament, that sort of thing.
Of course, the good news for Mark Johnson is, one, he's Mark Johnson. He's, ingrained in the culture. He built the women's hockey program. I don't think there's a single person on this planet that would even consider calling for his job at all. But, and it does help, too, the fact that people view him favorably when you compare him to Mike Eves, who's, they struggled last year. They kind of failed to meet expectations a couple years before that. So it's, I don't know, I'll be interested to see how they fare this year.
Yeah, there's no way he will get fired for only making it to the Final Four or something like that. But it's certainly, it is interesting that the two programs are trending in such different ways. And, Wisconsin men's hockey is one of the top all-time, programs if you look historically. So I think that job would be open for Mike Johnson or Mark Johnson.
Yeah.
But does he want it? Because he's built a dynasty where he is. So there's a decent chance he wants to just stay put. But I think that the job would be open if he said, yeah, I'd like that job, Barry Alvarez. Barry Alvarez would probably, before the ink could even dry, they'd be done.
And, he was up for the men's job when Mike Eves got it originally, and he got passed over. I'm sure he's pretty upset about it at the time, but then he became the women's coach, and you really don't know how he feels now because, he's built the women's hockey program. It's his. So I don't know. That'd be interesting to see if Eves does end up getting fired.
Yeah, that will be probably the big story of the spring is seeing if Eves keeps his job and seeing who replaces him. Because, I know that maybe you go to a guy like Chris Chelios, who's currently an assistant coach for the Detroit Red Wings, illustrious NHL career, as well as a great Wisconsin hockey career. So there certainly are other replacements, but I think he would certainly be the front runner.
Yeah, I think he would be the front runner, but I do think that there certainly, as you mentioned, Chelios and others, that it would be no guaranteed thing. Anyway, we'll move on now to another big story brewing this weekend, that Wisconsin may be considering switching over from Adidas to Under Armour. There was a discussion on that earlier today. The Board of Regents is going to vote on it tomorrow. If they vote to approve it, which everyone expects they will, it'll move to the athletic board. So at this point, it just seems like it's going through the formal process, and it's all but a done deal.
Right, yeah. This morning, Jeff Petrikis of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reported that that's likely the transition that they'll be making tomorrow. Wisconsin has been outfitted by Adidas since 2011. And according to Petrikis' report, the Badgers are poised to sign a new 10-year deal with Under Armour starting next season.
Yeah. I do believe that they've been with them since 2001. They've signed 5-year contracts, and they've kept renewing them. The Under Armour deal would be for 10 years, which I was at the meeting this morning, and some of the board members kind of expressed concern, why 10 over 5 years? Just out of curiosity, but it's commonplace now within. There was mention of a similar deal with Michigan, who has a 15-year deal. So it's at this point, it seems like it's a for sure thing, which might be good.
Yeah,
Wisconsin.
I know that a lot of fans have been complaining about the Adidas jerseys that they've been providing, especially for basketball, but then also mild complaints for football. Wisconsin becoming the third Big Ten team to rep Under Armour with Northwestern and Maryland, where the CEO and founder of Under Armour went to college. So those two schools, and we've seen that those two schools have had radically different jerseys for every game, kind of Oregon style. But if you look at, say, a Notre Dame or a Northwestern, their uniforms stayed mostly the same. So it'll be interesting to see, over the next few years, how Wisconsin's jerseys change or stay the same.
Yeah, I think the breaking point for a lot of fans have been last year during the NCAA tournament when they had those horrific jerseys and they were striped weird. And
fanny packs.
Yeah, it was not a good look. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see because you do think there will be some Wisconsin fans who would be opposed to real fancy uniforms like they do at Maryland or anything like that because Wisconsin has the whole traditional feel to it, just the way they play. I feel like you might see some blowback.
Absolutely. And in Adidas' defense, they did put out some cool throwback uniforms that the basketball team will be wearing later this season. So they certainly tried to kind of up the ante, but I just don't think it was enough because I don't know what type of bid they put forth, but the Under Armour deal is huge. It's a significant amount more than what Wisconsin's making right now. So if Adidas just wanted to renew what they currently were kind of doing, they got blown out of the water.
And it's also, even if there might be some fans who wouldn't be happy with the crazy-looking uniforms, it's important for the athletic department. They have to appeal to players, and a lot of them, they like these what Nike and Under Armour do at Oregon, at Maryland. Those types of things.
Yeah, when the older season ticket holders are complaining about the uniforms, but the teenagers and high school kids, especially the recruits, are oh man, this is sick, this looks awesome, then that's what really matters. Mm-hmm. Because sure, the boosters pay more, but they don't play on the football field.
Definitely, and it looks like the official news conference is going to be 1 p.m. tomorrow at Camp Randall Stadium, so looks like A.D. Barry Alvarez will be there, and he'll have the official. I'm sure they'll divulge some more of the official numbers regarding the deal and some more of those little details.
Yeah, there's the deal with Adidas expires, I believe, in February of 2016, so it wouldn't be an immediate transition, but it's in the near future.
All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of the Cardinal Zone podcast. Thank you for the discussion, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks for listening.